So now I'd like to reintroduce you to Niki Armstrong, who's going to be, and Ann Wheeler, who you haven't met yet today. Ann Wheeler comes from RTI. She's a neuropsychologist who has been working with the Angelman syndrome community for well over a decade, I would say, well before my time. I met Ann right when I joined the community, and she's been a force, a real force, with helping to support endpoints for Angelman syndrome, as well as really ensuring we have all the data in a place in which it can be used. So they're going to talk to you about data. The title of their talk is Your Data Matters, GASR, the Global Angelman Syndrome Registry, and Ladder Synergies. All of your data needs to be put together and utilized in the best possible way, and they're going to talk to you how they're doing that. Welcome.
So one of the other roles that I play, is there anything
there it is.
Okay. So one of the other roles that I play at FAST, because like most of us there, we have more than one role, is as the US-based curator for the Global Angelman Syndrome Registry. I work alongside Megan Tones, who's out of Australia and who really wishes she could be here, but is not here. And also with Megan Cross as well, who described herself as dodgy earlier. And I'm using that word now just because I think we need to use dodgy in the US more. That's the best word. But for those of you who are not aware, the Global Angelman Syndrome Registry, which we fondly call GASR here in the US, is a caregiver, mostly parent report registry for all individuals living with Angelman syndrome. It's web-based, which means you complete it online, either on a desktop or on your a device, a phone, and it's international, so you can participate from any country. So how do you participate? I'm hoping you all know this already, but in case you don't, how do you participate? The first step is that you register, and to register you can go to angelmanregistry.info, and you sign in and you give your parent guardian information, where you're located, contact information, the information about the individual living with Angelman syndrome. And that registration part is also part of the FAST search and rescue. So that's how we count and identify where everyone is located. Okay? After you do that, you receive an email so that you can consent. The consent process involves watching a video that talks to you just about everything that happens with the data, the benefits of the data, the risks, which are very low, and the potential options. So you get to make choices about how your data is used. You can consent about whether you want your data to be de-identified and shared with other researchers. You can consent to whether you want to be contacted about clinical trials. So you have choices to make. After you make those choices, you then provide the data. So that happens by completing online surveys that we call modules about your loved one, and also, plug on genetics part, upload your genetic test report. So as I said before, this is a truly global registry. We have more than 2,500 participants in more than 90 countries. It's currently available completely in 7 languages, and we're working on multiple others. So lots of ways to participate in lots of countries. And I think one of the really important pieces I want to talk about is what is GASR's role in the Angelman Syndrome Registry. So the first role is that I mentioned already, it's in counting. So by doing the quick registration part, we know where you are. And that is really important because we know Angelman syndrome is underdiagnosed, especially in adults, in older adults who didn't have genetic testing when they were younger. It wasn't available, and many of them have not come back to have genetic testing. And then also in countries that have less readily available genetic testing, we know we're underdiagnosing. But when we can count where people are located, we can figure out where we're missing people, and that helps us learn where we need to be better, where we need to figure out new diagnostic strategies in those places. Another piece is that GASR is really accessible and flexible. It meets the European compliance standards, and anybody can participate from any place. And that opens up a really important piece, because that means we can get data on all individuals living with Angelman syndrome. And that's important because every individual living with Angelman syndrome is unique. So if we want to get the full picture of what Angelman syndrome looks like, we need to get as many different people as possible data on them. Another really key piece is that the data we're collecting is caregiver or parent data. You all know that your loved one is different at the hospital or clinic than they are at home. And in order to be able to get the data, what you see every day, collecting parent and caregiver data is really key. You know your loved one best. The de-identified data, if you provide consent, can be easily shared with other researchers and combined with other data sets. And again, if you consent, we can use it for clinical trial recruitment. For any researchers in the room, you can, of course, ask for access to the data that is within GASR. Since the registry started in 2016, we've had more than 100 requests. That request process varies quite a bit depending on how detailed of data you want. If you want data counts, you can actually just email for those. But if you want more detailed, de-identified patient-level data, that actually goes through a data review process, but is definitely a potential. So how has the data been used by researchers? So a number of studies have been published, and there's multiple more that are still in process, looking at things like behavior and sleep, things that parents know best and see the most of, and so can comment on really well. In addition, we've also had reach out from industry to try to identify where individuals were living so that they could help figure out where clinical trial sites should be. So why do you want to join the Global Angelman Syndrome Registry? Be counted, share your story, make sure we understand the full spectrum of Angelman syndrome. You can choose whether or not you want to be contacted with clinical trial opportunities, and really, anyone can participate who's interested in participating. I do want to also tell you that we are trying to make the Global Angelman Syndrome Registry better. So for anyone who participated in the past, you might be aware that doing the whole, all of the modules that are in the registry took about 2 hours. Well, we are working on a process to make it much easier. We're adding an easy button. So coming in 2025, we're going to have what we call the Next Gen Global Angelman Syndrome Registry. And that improvement process, I won't go into all the details, but essentially we went through every single question in the registry to make sure that it was appropriate, that we were getting useful data, and then now we're in a process of going back to all of our stakeholders, so all the researchers and industry and clinicians and families, to find out if the data points are important. We're then going to test it out, and in 2025 it'll be available. At this point, what looks like we're going to have a question reduction of about 2/3 to 75%. So if you take that 2 hours, that means we're hoping to get it down to about 20 minutes to complete everything. So that's awesome. So if you're interested in advancing Angelman Syndrome Registry, if you're not in yet, you can scan that QR code. It'll take you where you can register. If you are already in the registry, please sign into your account. Make sure you've gone through the consents. And then our one ask of you, because we're in the middle of updating things, is to complete the history of diagnosis and results module. That one's not really changing, so all the data you provide there will stay the same. And you can also upload your loved one's genetic test report, because we're using all of that information right now to review the genetic test reports. Now I'll turn it over to Anne to talk about ladder.
Thank you. All right, well, so as Allison mentioned, I'm Ann Wheeler. I'm a neurodevelopmental psychologist, and I do research at RTI International. We do a bunch of stuff related to Angelman syndrome, including trying to advance efforts for newborn screening. A lot of the outcome measures we're working on trying to either make better or help validate. We work very closely with the natural history study on publications and getting that information back out to you all. And I'm also a clinician at the UNC clinic, so I see patients with Angelman syndrome every month, and so I'm very well versed and spend a lot of time in the community, so I'm glad to be here. Today I'm wearing the hat as the director of the ladder database, and so I'm going to give you all more information about what ladder is, what we're trying to do with it, and why it is important for you all to be involved. So ladder stands for Linking Angelman and Dup15q Databases for Expanded Research. And the ladder database that I run is part of a larger network that is sponsored by the Angelman Syndrome Foundation that's trying to bring together patients, caregivers, researchers, and clinicians, and data from patients with Angelman syndrome to help inform clinical practice. And so the ladder data repository is one of those elements. So there's several different components, including regular clinician meetings where we're talking about different types of services and what seems to be working best for specific needs that arise. So the ladder data repository is brings in data from different places that you may be providing information about your loved one with Angelman. So if you are in the US-based natural history study, your data is in Ladder. If you go to an ASF clinic, your data you will be asked if you are okay to have your data be in Ladder. If you've been in the Angelman Syndrome Foundation registry, your data, or at least some of your information, has been shared with Ladder. So we're trying to bring together all these different resources so that it's in one spot. And that helps us increase the number of variables we have. It increases the power for analysis the more people we have information on. And it allows us to then generate all of this data into ways that we can then answer questions that are coming up from the community, whether that be a research question or the development of therapeutics or the validation of therapeutics or for clinical guidance. And so that's sort of the whole goal of what we're trying to do with Ladder. So we do two broad things. We curate and harmonize existing data sets. So again, we bring in data and where we can, we try to link it. And the whole purpose of this is to help us accelerate our knowledge, right? We want to know what's going on, what different kids with Angelman syndrome are experiencing, what families are experiencing, and it really is intended to help us accelerate and promote effective treatment. And so that may be therapeutics that are being developed, or it may be actual strategies for how to manage sleep, for example. And then we are also then taking all that data and using processes that protect the privacy of any individual who provides data to us, but also allows researchers and clinicians and those who really want to see the data and help develop answers to questions can get that data and access it in a quick and efficient way. So the way folks access data from Ladder is we have a data access committee. This was established in 2019, and it includes anybody who's contributed data, so researchers who have contributed data. It includes members from GASR as well as the ASF, and our role at RTI is just to facilitate, so we don't actually make any decisions. And so we've developed, the data access committee has developed the guidance for how data can be shared and where it can be shared and how long it can be shared. We monitor that. We have data we do all of the regulatory components for data access committees, assure people have IRBs, assure the data is being used in an ethical manner. And then we require that anybody who uses the data help us develop family-friendly reports that summarize whatever they found from their analysis so that we can give that back to the community and families are able to see what their data is contributing to. And we have 3 levels of data access, so that we do have a data dashboard that has just high levels of numbers of who's in Ladder. And then for the ability to get access to the raw data, or to be able to use Ladder as a way of recruiting or gathering additional data, they do need to go through our data access committee, which is voted on before they're allowed to have access to the data. We currently have 124 unique data sets on individuals with Angelman syndrome that reflect 18,000 different variables, so lots of data. This again includes data from the natural history study, it includes data from other research studies, it includes data from the Ovid clinical trial, our clinical needs study, which I'll mention in a minute, as well as registries. We have, to date, had 39 level 2 data access applications that were approved by our data access committee. Most of these requests have come from industry and pharma companies looking to develop therapeutics. We also have had multiple academic researchers request data, and importantly, I think, is we've got next generation researchers who are using this data to develop their own research trajectories, which is exciting. And then we've had 3 level 3 data access applications, which again is recruitment and a new data collection. So another part of the Ladder Learning Network is this Angelman Syndrome Clinical Needs Survey. So again, if you go to an Angelman Syndrome clinic in the United States, you will be asked to complete this clinical needs survey. And it serves 2 purposes. One is for research. It's sort of an additional natural history study component where we're able to track a bunch of different components of clinical needs over time. And then it also serves as an intake for the clinicians. So they are able to gather the same type of information across all the clinics, and then they're able to follow up with that when you're in the clinic appointment. And all of this information, with family permission, goes directly into the Ladder database. So just to give an idea of how we envision using the data in Ladder to develop clinical guidelines, and we've done this with an upcoming paper that will be out soon, focused on epilepsy and seizure incidents. So the first thing we do is we ask the clinicians within the network, what are important questions that you're hearing from caregivers? What do we need to be focusing on? They, with them, might develop a quick survey. We might send it out to caregivers through Ladder. Then that information gets presented back to the clinicians, and then the clinicians sit down and talk about the results and come up with agreed upon guidance for how they, or additional research questions that need to be asked in the next phase. We are also working on a way for families to share medical records. So one of the things that we, as a community, would really like to have more information on is real-world evidence. So, something different than when you're just asked a very specific question about your child, different than when your child's brought into the clinic and given a Bailey, but more like how often are they getting infections? How is their growth looking over time? Those are things that is really nice to have from medical records. And so we're working on ways that families can provide their medical record to Ladder, knowing that it will be protected and safe, but also be used in ways that can promote treatment and therapeutic development for Angelman syndrome. And then we take all the data. As I mentioned, the family-friendly reports is one way that we try to give back to the community, but we also have a social media presence where we try to share clips of what kinds of things are coming out of findings from the Ladder data set that can allow families to make new decisions or learn more about the condition. So we do have a secure portal for caregivers, and we do ask caregivers to sign up. And the reason we do that is because when you sign up, you can give us permission to be able to take a look at different data sets and say, oh, this is the same person, because we know the date of birth, we know, whereas if we don't have that information, if you don't sign up, it comes in blinded. We can't see it, we can't unblind it. And so by giving us permission to link data, it gives more power to the data set. And then it enrolls you to learn more about how that data is being used. So so it's different from the registry, which we can talk about next. Did you want to cover this?
Sure.
Yeah.
So Ladder and GASR are, am I mic'd again? Yes? Okay. Two different registries. GASR is a registry. Ladder is a data repository. Currently, if you want to participate in both, they are separate. So that you can't, unfortunately, at this point, we can't just sign up once and be a participant in both. But we are working on ways to try to streamline this process so that we can work together. And one of our first kind of forays into this is actually a poster that's out front in the monitors, if you get a chance to take a look at it. And it's working on combining our genetic information that's in there. So some kinds of genetic changes in Angelman syndrome are really rare, and so to be able to understand them, we need to be able to compile as much data as possible. And so what we did was try to take a look at that. So we each looked at our individual data sets, because we can't identify data yet, but we were able to each take a look at our independent data sets and pull all of that information together. And we're hoping that we can use this to build additional ways to be able to pull all of our data together so that we can really study the more rare things and just better understand Angelman syndrome with less effort on your part is our end goal.
Yes, that's the main goal.
So thank you all for being here today and for participating in these very important registries. We do have a table out front. You're welcome to stop by and see me or Megan, or you can email us with any questions, but we really appreciate it. Thank you.